Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thanks to our witnesses. The quickest way to end the pandemic is to vaccinate as many people as possible. There's growing evidence from the UK and other allied countries that the first dose of a two-dose vaccine provides as much protection as other one-shot versions and equally reduces the spread. According to the New England Journal of Medicine, the Pfizer vaccine provides 92.6% efficiency or efficacy, while the second dose only marginally increases this. By giving the first dose to as many people as possible and slightly delaying the second dose, the scientific research shows significantly curbs the virus's spread by increasing the number of people protected. That's why so many other countries are doing one shot for everyone first to cover as many people as possible. And I want to thank my colleague across the aisle, Congressman Foster, for spearheading this effort. And I'm hopeful that the Biden administration will respond soon to our letter. Continuing to give two doses will delay protection for many and may cost lives. A year ago, the American people were told that we needed 2 weeks to flatten the curve. The next 12 months were unlike any other we've ever seen. Broad, one size fits all lockdowns brought devastating consequences for millions of Americans. Screenings for cancer and other serious health conditions were and still are down. States imposed restrictive shutdown orders. Schools were shut down and moved to computer screens. Thousands of businesses permanently closed their doors. Meanwhile, young people face a serious educational and mental health crisis, as many have not stepped foot in a classroom in months. Millions of children are not getting the mental health counseling provided by their school system. Youth mental health visits to the emergency department have increased by 30%, 30+% in our country. And a CDC survey in August estimated that a quarter of young adults admitted to having thoughts of suicide. The death rate from suicide has not yet been reported. The lockdowns have continued long past the point when they ceased to make sense. In fact, less than 300 children have died to COVID, yet a 10% increase in suicide kills far more, since the average death to suicide fluctuates between 4,000 and 6,000 a year. The science is clear that in-person learning is the best option for students and teachers and will save lives. We know this. It's long past time to reopen America's schools. The failure to do so is a failure to put service to students over control by the unions and selfish politicians. Instead, the so-called stimulus passed by the Democrats rewards lockdowns that states and teachers unions are pressing to keep their schools shuttered. Congress is sending over 120 billion in additional money to schools, but most 68 billion allocated for schools over the past year still hasn't even been spent. In fact, the CBO estimates that only 5% of this new funding will be spent this fiscal year. The bill actually postpones the money into future years to support and incentivize these closures, or as long as I described above, incentivizing harming children. Hundreds of billions of dollars are going to reward states for dogmatically imposing lockdowns. This payoff to blue states and cities is destroying lives, and it's time the truth be told. You've heard my colleagues across the aisle pat themselves on the back for this almost $2 trillion more to our debt, while almost $1 trillion of previously approved COVID relief hasn't even been spent yet. All so we can reward those states that closed. This isn't a relief plan. It's not about COVID. It's a spending spree with the taxpayer's credit card. Mr. Kudlow, former Clinton Treasury Secretary and Obama economic advisor Larry Summers wrote that 1.9 trillion stimulus will, and I quote, set off inflationary pressures of a kind we have not seen in a generation, with consequences for the value of the dollar and financial stability. Sir, could you explain those consequences to this, what it'll mean to our economy, to our trade, the value of the dollar, et cetera?
With the bill. And I don't know if I agree 100% on the inflation issue. And I don't know if I agree on the dollar. But he's raising the risk, the threats. And he's a very smart fellow. He's a friend of mine. We've worked together in the past. And I think people should have listened to that. You know, you made some important points about the wastefulness of the spending. The incentive structures were perverse. States will get more money if they have a higher unemployment rate, which means they have an incentive to keep lockdowns. I never understood how that could possibly be in the bill. And also, we had so much unspent money. It was $1 trillion. And you're right about the 130 billion. That, by the way, that money for schools, that's schools, those not even going to be spent. I think only 4 billion would be spent in 2021. The rest of it would be spent in the next 5 or 6 years, which shows that the aim here was not to get schools open, but I think political interest group payoffs. So Larry Summers should be heated. I don't want to be a bear in this hearing. I like what I see in the economy. I think we are in a boom-like situation as long as we keep opening, and we keep vaccinating. We don't need tax hikes. We don't need regulatory increases. We don't need to cripple the private sector. We don't need to end fossil fuels. Let 1,000 flowers bloom. Let free enterprise handle this, and we're going to come out of it just fine.
And send the kids back to school. I yield, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. Now I understand Ms. Maloney has agreed that we can now go to Mr. Foster.
Thank you. And am I audible and visible here?
Yes, sir.
Okay, well, first off, I'd like to thank Dr. Green for joining